I have a follow-up question. Last night you were talking to a group of people from the community and from academia, and we were talking about the intersection of popular culture or mass communication with how it matters to our lives. Can you speak a little bit more about your calling in relation to those two areas of what you try to bring to students' awareness and what you see in popular culture?
Sure. I'm not a believer, and I don't think anybody really believes this now, in that whole bullet theory of culture, meaning that you watch a film or you read a book and you're just sort of a zombie. You just can't resist it, and it changes you. I don't believe that's how culture works, but I do believe that popular culture in particular contributes to our notions of what we think of as normal and what we think of as acceptable and what we fear. And that because especially in 20th, 21st century America, we are surrounded by it. I mean, there are people walk around with earplugs, you know, listening to stuff all the time. They walk into a room, they turn on the television. The Super Bowl, one of the Super Bowl ads, showed some poor man who was forced to go shopping with his wife, and to endure that hardship. You know, he was supposed to buy a portable television and carry it around so he could watch sports while she was shopping. Completely ridiculous commercial.
Maybe not for men.
I guess not. I'll tell Joanne. And so I think it's very important to understand what's going on in culture. I mean, I'm not one of those people that disdains popular culture. I watch way too much reality TV. And I'm missing Project Runway tonight, by the way, so unless I have it on, Jack and Dance.
Yeah, Jack and Dance. You get it on there?
That's right. But I think it's important to be a critical consumer, like you are of any kind of communication. I think it's important to understand how mass media is structured. I think it's important to know what the competing interests are. I think it's important to know that you can talk back to the cultural messages. And I think it's important to know that you can create your own. And so that's part of what I think is the intersection. It's teaching people, I think, to be better citizens of the world, to use another corny term, because especially, I mean, in a democracy, you have to think. You have to think critically. You can't just listen to the messages and take them at face value. And so I think it's terribly important as a teacher to be able to invite students into that conversation.
Mentioning that you can create your own messages, last night's discussion was a bit about a new documentary that you're making. In addition, in reviewing your CV, curriculum vitae, you actually, as long ago as I think 1991, have a documentary that you worked on in there as well. So obviously you've tried to find ways of expressing creatively ideas that you have a passion about, kind of outside the normal academic, write an article for a journal and we'll get that published. Can you talk a little bit about those documentaries and why it is a passion for you?
Sure. I am not, as I said a couple of times before, I haven't taken a traditional scholarship route for a number of different reasons. I appreciate high-level abstract theory. I can incorporate it, but I don't think that way. The reason that I do the kind of research that I do and the way that I teach is to try to take the big ideas and relate them to something that everybody else can understand. I mean, I think of myself sometimes as a translator. That's what I do when I teach. What did Kenneth Burke mean? Well, all right, let's see. And can we relate it to something that people encounter in their daily life? You know, why is Bitzer's rhetorical situation such a useful concept? I think it's a wonderful concept, but I want people to be able to apply that to their own life as opposed to, again, reading about it just abstractly. So I got interested in documentary filmmaking because I wanted to find a medium that could reach a wide number of people that weren't going to pick up a scholarly text. And I wish that there were more outlets, or I could find more outlets to get ideas about communication and the ideas that I'm interested into more of the mainstream. It's back to that notion of the public discourse and the kind of conversations that people have. And there are some scholars who are very good at doing that.
Not very, but it's a small outlet, like you said. It's not the norm.
Right. So the impetus for the initial documentary was when Loyola University Chicago, which is a coeducational school, merged, which is a kind word for takeover, the only remaining Catholic women's college in the state of Illinois, Mundelein College. And when we learned about this, I was at Loyola at the time, we were introduced to some of the teachers that were going to be absorbed into our department. And there were two very feisty nuns who were going to come into our department, and they asked me what I thought of this merger, and I said something really stupid, like, well, I think it's great, we get more space. And one of them said, are you a feminist? And I said, well, yes, I am. And she said, well, you can't be much of one if you don't know the history of women's education in the United States. And I said, well, you're right. And if I don't know it, and I've been teaching in women's studies by that time for a long time, if I don't understand the debt we owe to not just Catholic women's colleges, but higher education with women, I bet a lot of other people don't know. And why don't we make a documentary that uses the tension over the merger, because some of the students at Mundelein were very, very upset at this. Why don't we use that? Why don't we interview people, both at Loyola and at Mundelein, and why don't we put it in the context of the history of women in higher education in the United States as a way to say, this is important. You need to know this piece of history. And even if women's colleges are in decline in terms of overall number, I think it's important that we understand what they did and why they formed. Mm-hmm. So I don't shoot, I don't edit, I don't do sound, but I found people who could do that, and I did what I'm doing on my current documentary with. I do the research, I do the writing, I do the editing, I do the construction, the narrative, and I make sure that it happens. So I'm in essence the producer. So, we distribute it. I had a wonderful time doing research in women's college archives all over the country, and then sent them all copies of the documentary. So I'm not in it to make money. I'm in it to get the word out and about something that I'm interested in.